Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'd like to thank the team for the invitation and the opportunity to speak with you today. I've had almost 20 years of experience working across the industry. I've had both technical as well as operational facing roles throughout that time. And in many of those situations, I've been responsible for one or many products. Um, we can think of the term a product as it potentially might be a piece of software that could be a product, or it might be a service. And in logistician might be having the role of responsible for that service to the end customer, or if you're working for a 3PL, you might have the responsibility of bringing that service to market in a B2B scenario. So what I've put together today is what I believe that the necessary strategy is to not just survive being a product manager, but really thrive in that role. And for that, we really must evaluate, innovate, and adapt. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So let's get started. So the first key to being a successful product manager is the ability to evaluate. And all companies that are bringing either new products to market or enhancing their existing ones must have evaluation strategies. And some of the features of a product management role allow that evaluation process to start with a cross-departmental coordination. And the evaluation of logistics products in particular may include internal or external stakeholders. And they could include departments from marketing, business operations, warehouse operations, the customers themselves. So out of that core evaluation process, there's going to be four things that the product manager should continue to stay focused on. One is the strategy and making sure that they're presenting relevant market information, facts, and strategies to the senior management team. The second is communication to ensure that essential to whether it's an internal customer or an external customer is providing a comprehensive set of arguments based on market data. The third is a team and having a great team. So that could be forming and coordinating a resource plan. So what type of resources and when. And the fourth is going to be your requirements. So these requirements could be from internal or external stakeholders. And when we talk about gathering requirements, product managers should always have a way to either prove or measure every requirement. So we always want requirements to be objective requirements and not subjective requirements. And bringing in that objectivity into our requirement allows two people to look at a piece of paper that contains a requirement and agree on how will we know when the requirement was satisfied. So we establish these measurements in the requirement process. So some influencing factors that can influence a product manager's success in that evaluation product can be extremely influenced by the other voices that are having voices to that product. So voices to that product could be the sales staff, and the sales staff has a voice in how they want to see that product influence. It could be the legal team, that the legal team has influence into how they want to see that product evolve. So the product management role, that responsibility is to really incorporate all of those internal and external factors that could affect those business decisions and therefore influence the direction of the product. So in particular, as logisticians, it's really important that the role of whoever is managing that product has the ability to communicate and listen. And again, tying it back to that actual market or fact-based data, so that when we get feedback, let's say that feedback is coming back from an operations perspective, that we're thinking about that feedback in the context of what is the data that I can use to either validate or invalidate this operations request that they're making of the product. So the next key part of product management we talk about is innovation. So after our evaluation stage, we move on to innovation. And these are the steps and phases of innovation. We analyze the current situation and identify problems. We collect and generate ideas properly. We organize your ideas. We evaluate ideas. We create a market to launch plan. Sometimes you'll hear that called a go-to-market plan. And then we introduce that innovation into the market. So the reason that I wanted to break out the phases, the steps and phases, is to show that innovation is not a linear process, and that innovation often has start and stop periods, and that innovation is a journey. And along this journey, I would challenge all logisticians to challenge their assumptions throughout the process. So, for example, when we think about analyzing and identifying the current problems, I would encourage teams when they're thinking about what that current situation and identifying problems is to not just use that from their own perspective of what a problem is, but to really think about that problem as it relates to the whole part of the organization. So again, if you have a role as a product manager that you are responsible for a specific product, to really make sure that you're asking your stakeholders what is their perspective of the problem and what's the data that they have access to. Again, when you're thinking about collecting and generating ideas, I would encourage that innovation to be a very collaborative process. These steps that you see here are not intended to say that it's the role of the product manager to do all of this, but rather it's the role of the product manager to steward these processes through the organization, to be a steward of that work. So, for example, one way that logistics organizations can organize their ideas might be to have a collaborative workspace where the problem can be identified and where potential ideas can be brainstormed. In a virtual world, that might look like collaborative workspace tools that can be shared across an organization, or it might look like a workshop potentially to brainstorm. In the create marketing launch plans, it's extremely important that that innovation is collaborative, whether that's a dedicated marketing team. In the case of if your product is for example, maybe your product is a piece of software, and you intend to bring that to market. Maybe you have a piece of supply chain software that you're actually incorporating the stakeholders from those specific groups. If your product is an internal product, you may want to maybe that internal product is going to, let's say, a sales staff, and you want to make sure that your sales staff really understand what the product features are. It's really important that you prep the market for identifying what specific problem do you believe that you are solving, and how do the features that you're bringing to market truly solve that. When we look at this in an example product, let's say that you are a product manager, and you are responsible for a transportation product. You have your core product dimension, which is your transportation product. And then you might have core product features that you're responsible as a part of that. If your product is a service, you might have a service. And let's say that in logistics, your product that you're bringing to market is an international air product, and you're offering a 7-day service. As a part of that 7-day service, you might have other core product features that the customer is getting as a part of that product. So there might be, for example, there might be documentation services or domestic consolidation, equipment management, compliance. These are all just examples of how a transportation product manager might define their core product features. And then when we look at the outer circle of those core product features, we're thinking about what are the extended customer benefits that a customer is getting. So it might be that the customer is getting benefit in terms of maybe potentially online proof of delivery, or they might be getting auto quoting, where you can auto quote customers on specific lanes. There might be an integrated billing solution as a part of that product. There might be education or training that's provided as a part of that product. So it's important as a product manager that in your process of innovation, that you're really understanding the what of what is your product, and that you're really understanding the why of why are users, customers choosing to use your product. What are the benefits that they're getting as a result of the core product features that you're bringing to market? In that innovation phase, I find that focusing on the what and the why, who's, kind of focusing on those core W's, what, why, who's, allow the ideas to be more centered and focused around the specific product, and exactly going back to what problem you're trying to solve. So the last area of product management that I believe is really important to thrive is adaptation. And through this, we really want to make sure that we're using data to make decisions. I've presented here some example metrics that a product manager may choose, and especially in logistics, may choose. So a product manager may choose to use user feedback as a way to determine, is a product meeting the stated objective? The product manager may choose to look at efficiency of the product to identify potential optimization opportunities. Potentially, maybe a measurement might be on-time delivery, but might be important to measure the on-time delivery of a given logistics product. And certainly product profitability is a concern, regardless if you are in logistics or another industry. But the point of this slide is really not to say that these measurements are exactly what's going to work for your particular product in logistics, but rather some ideas to communicate that all products must be measured. And you are likely, of any given product, whether you have an operational facing product, a software facing product, you are likely going to have many measurements that you're going to use. You're not just going to use one measurement, but it's important that you're using data in order to understand how to make adjustments within your product. I'd like to point out that once you have identified those ways that you have measured your product, and you've come up with something that's very specific to your specific logistics product, that you're being adaptive by identifying the levers that need to be pulled to improve any one given score. So let's say, for example, that you have a challenge with efficiency. You may determine that in order to adjust the efficiency score and increase the efficiency score, you may need to look at certain areas of the product that enable you to increase that score. So that might be your technology, it might be the design, potentially it's the price point, maybe it's the durability of the product. The notes that you see here on the screen, these are just ideas of potential levers. But your organization, you will know the specific levers around your product. And it's really about using that data to identify which levers need to be pulled. So let's say, for example, that you are struggling with uh, uh, user feedback or customer feedback of your product. Perhaps your quality of your product is not as it's not as high as is what you think versus what your user perspective is. So really, this is just about staying adaptive and always being willing to identify unique levers that need to be pulled in your organization. I hope that today, by focusing on evaluation, innovating, and adapting, that this has been helpful to provide a structure to how product managers in logistics can think about ways to thrive in their products. So thanks, Emily.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amanda. Obviously, I want to extend a huge thank you to you from all of us here at Procurement and Supply Chain Live. And obviously, the audience, I'm sure, had the same thoughts because that was extremely insightful. I'm hoping we can kind of jump into a small Q&A session now. We've got some time. So obviously, kind of off the back of that presentation, these are going to be some relevant questions regarding that. Firstly, I wanted to ask, how would a product manager communicate a strategic vision? I think this is something that is obviously really important and might be different for some different people, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Emily. I think that, from my perspective, the vision can be communicated in a number of different formats. It's really, different organizations have different cultures. And so that format could be, maybe it's a write-up, maybe it's a formal essay in which you as a person carrying the strategic vision has a lot of content to provide and a lot of data, and you want to sort of tell the story in a formal write-up. But it might also be a PowerPoint, such as, more traditional format. Guilty of that, guilty as charged today to use a PowerPoint. And it may be, maybe there's a monthly meeting or a quarterly meeting where you have the opportunity to present these ideas. If not, it could be something that you make a proposal to senior management to say, I'd like to have an opportunity to present. But I really don't think that the format matters as much as the content. And again, it's really about making sure that that strategic vision for the product contains a lot of data. And how did you come up with that strategic vision? What is your, hypothesis for that particular proposal you're making?
Yeah, and I'm kind of wanted to touch on data right now, actually. I think obviously some of your presentation was about that near the end, and it is important. And you also mentioned the importance of the W's, right? The what, the whys, the who's, and obviously this, it's a lot of data. You have to find out all of this data. I imagine answering these questions leverages the use of data. So I kind of want to propose a bit of a question, maybe a bit of a counter argument to what if I don't have access to this sort of data because I don't have an advanced analytics platform or program to kind of find this out? I can't run these advanced data metrics. How would I go about this? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, great question. I think that is a myth that certainly if you have access to an advanced analytics platform and if you have access to analytics staff or talent, that is great. But, in logistics, that's not always available to everyone. And again, regardless of what your product is or where you sit on that, if you sit on the B2C side or on the B2B side, I think it's important to not get stuck on the platform and instead to leverage the data that you do have access to. That can be, Excel, It can be, pivots in Excel. It could be simple visualizations in Power BI, for example. It doesn't have to be. There's many tools like that. But I think not focusing necessarily on having every metric possible, but just start with what you know. Start with what you can get your hands on and how you can measure the as is today. And then save the deep dives for later. Start with what it is and, stagger your way to the deep dives. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither were most advanced, most companies when evaluating their products or when understanding their products. There's a real art to the study of that data. So I think not getting hung up on knowing everything on day one is important.
Absolutely. And something that I picked up in your presentation I thought was quite interesting was you mentioned kind of collaborative workspace tools or collaborative workspaces to help solve problems. I kind of wanted to know if you had, obviously, I'm sure this comes into it, but when you have several ideas or to solve a problem or problems brought to the forefront, how do you pick which idea should be brought to market in the end?
Yeah, good question. So, in software, in the management of software products, so if you are using a commercial software in order to manage your supply chain, the folks who manage that software, there's a insider saying that they have, which is fail fast. And I really like that phrasing in fail fast because it's not failure is bad. It's fail fast as a way to how will I quickly know whether this idea I can execute at scale, right? So maybe let's say I have a hypothesis for an idea, and how can I test this hypothesis? How can I create a way to test whether this idea is passable? So thinking about in those steps of innovation, you might think of these as like gates, as adding gates of how can I test out my idea in a smaller environment? Okay. And then maybe in a bigger environment, and then, whatever it is, but you're not going to, in global supply chains, it really depends on, what product you're talking about. But if you're talking about a product that touches many nodes or many geographies, it's very unlikely that you are going to deploy a global solution and that your global solution will have been your first idea. It's really about how can you test your idea in a meaningful way to give you that gate to say, should I continue to keep going with this idea, or should I stop and now go to a different idea? And the faster that you can get to a gate to test your hypothesis, and the faster that you can either move to the next gate or go back, that's what they're talking about when they say fail fast. So it's really about your speed is also your a speed to be adaptive, not just your speed to market, but your speed to the next idea. So I feel that will continue to keep organizations and logisticians extremely nimble, which is really critical, as we know, in this, global reality that we're all in of global supply chains right now.
Yeah, and actually, off the back of that, I kind of wanted to ask you a question about the past 18 months, because we've got a little bit of extra time. I wanted to
Yeah.
know how the past 18 months has kind of changed the way you collaborate. Obviously, you mentioned these collaborative workspace tools. I can imagine now, more than ever, these are the most important things in an organization to communicate and kind of work on. So I wondered if you could just touch on that and let us know how the past 18 months have been for you.
Yeah, it's been, me like everyone else, maybe listening or tuning in. It's, been really challenging. I currently manage a team of remote workers, and these remote workers are throughout the globe, and we're in different time zones. So I think in terms of establishing, our goal has been to establish some team norms around communication, to be very transparent with what are going to be kind of the boundaries of our team communication. So, for example, we don't want to have, you know, we want to keep our work communication into a work environment. So it's really important that we try to limit. For example, we don't want to do a bunch of different ideas around text messages if we're talking about creating a collaborative team where someone might not be on the text message. We want to try and use our work platform that we have. I think, there's everything from like very big strategic challenges of our current uh, work from home for many organizations that have not gone fully back to work. And then there's also just really tactical ones that, quite frankly, I think that they require some transparency, and also for the employees to really take ownership of that conversation within their organization. Um, so there's no magic bullet to this. Every team, every logistician, every supply chain, person is working through this to figure this out. But it's really about communication.